It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. We've got, of course, security news. We'll get you up to date on all of that. And then we're going to answer questions from our audience, some really great ones. And, of course, Steve's great answers coming up next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 536, recorded Tuesday, December 1st, 2015. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 224. Security Now is brought to you by Audible.com. To download the free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. And by Braintree. Even the best mobile app won't work without the right payments API. That's where the Braintree V.0 SDK comes in. One amazingly simple integration that gives you every way to pay. Try out the sandbox and see for yourself at braintreepayments.com/securitynow. And by IT Pro TV. A good IT Pro is always learning, and IT Pro TV is the resource to keep your IT skills up to date with engaging and informative video tutorials. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the lifetime of your account, go to itpro.tv/securitynow and use the code SN30. It's time for Security Now, the show that protects you and your loved ones online with this man here. He is the explainer-in-chief, Mr. Stephen Tiberius Gibson, from his fortress of solitude in beautiful Irvine, California. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Leo. So we're going to give another try for a Q&A. Last week there was just so much to talk about, and we spent so much time that we ran out, and we only got 2 out of the targeted 10 questions. So I've got the 8 that we didn't get to, and I found a couple more to round it out to 10. So this will also be a Q&A number 224. There were a couple big stories, interestingly, I think, deep technical, that I was initially thinking, well, maybe we could like squeeze it in, but I thought, that hasn't worked out so well for us recently. So they will probably be the topics for next week's and perhaps the week after podcast, rather than trying to get too much news in. And we didn't have, it hasn't been a crazy week. I did want to briefly follow up on my controversial comments, which drew a huge amount of friendly fire from our listeners about law enforcement and iOS unlocking under warrants. I found an interesting note about Mozilla's life after Google. Microsoft has responded to Dell's epic mistake with the self-signed certificate, including the private key. Turns out that Arris cable modems are in the doghouse for a bad reason. Blackberry has said no to a major government. 67, actually the press is covering it as 66, but one just got filed. 67 companies are being sued for their use of HTTPS, TLS, elliptic curve crypto by, guess what? Somebody in East Texas. And we know what that means. Then we have another welcome nail in the Adobe Flash coffin, which actually I cribbed that phrase, the nail in the coffin, from TechCrunch that noted this story. A little bit of miscellany and 10 questions and answers questions from our listeners.
Answers from you.
From me. Yeah.
Sometimes the listeners have answers. Yeah.
Great podcast.
Well, we're excited, and let me pause in the flow to mention our great sponsor, Audible.com. Steve still reads. He's a little weird that way. Personally, nobody got time for that. I like to listen, because when I'm listening, I can be working out, I can be doing the chores, I can be commuting, whatever you do that you can't hold a book. Audible means that you can still read. And when I discovered Audible, I was still driving back and forth to San Francisco for Tech TV, and it probably saved my life. It certainly kept me engaged and awake, and kept me from getting a little road rage during those long commutes. Audible is a great bookstore. Start there. 180,000 plus books, fiction, nonfiction, science fiction. Oh, they're great in science fiction. I listen to a lot of history. In fact, I'm very excited. It's in my cart, and I haven't bought it yet. But I'm very excited about a new book that just came out that is a history of the ancient world, kind of one of those surveys, but it's getting some rave reviews by Susan Wise Bauer. And that's one of the nice things about Audible is you can read the description, you can read the reviews from listeners, you can even listen to the reader, and that's important because and I know John Lee is great because he's one of my favorite narrators. Their readers are not dry, dull, dusty readers. They really bring these books to life. I think that's something important to understand. But I understand you may also be a little nervous about the idea of listening instead of reading. Although if you're a science fiction reader, you've got to try some of these classics like the Asimov Foundation trilogy because it's like a movie. It's like better than a movie. It's a movie in your mind. It just comes alive. One of our chatters said he just started reading Glyn John's new movie. He's the recording engineer who did Beatles and the Stones and the Zeppelin, some of the greatest bands ever. And he's written a book called Sound Man. I listen to a lot of those, the rock and roll biographies and autobiographies. Audible's great for that. There's just so much. The Martian, yeah. They're right now they're releasing the Harry Potter series read by the great Jim Dale, who I only play a little bit of Jim Dale reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. You'll get an idea. Because here's a guy, he does all the voices. And the book comes alive like a movie.
The boy who lived.
This is right from the very beginning.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense.
Can you imagine?
Mr. Dursley was the director of a firm called Grunnings.
It's already, it's like I'm getting chills. I want to hear the whole thing again. Here's the deal. We're going to get you a book free so that you can decide if this is for you. Go to audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. Pick your first book, and there's so many good ones. The hardest thing is really picking that first book. So pick one. Doesn't matter. Whatever you like the best. Maybe one of your favorites. Listen to it as opposed to having read it. You're going to sign up for the Gold account. That's the book a month subscription plan. You also get the daily digest of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, your pick. You can cancel anytime in the first 30 days. You will pay nothing, but you get to keep the book forever. That's yours now. Audible has great apps on every platform. I just installed it on my Windows 10 machine. Of course, it's on iOS and Android, Windows Phone. And it's fun. It's just fun to listen to. You can even listen in your browser now. So your Chromebook, you can listen. Audible, I just want you to try it. Please do me a favor. And by the way, it's a way of thanking them because they have really supported our shows now for 6-7 years, something like that. audiblepodcast.com/securitynow. Give them a try. Your first book's free.
Well, and pursuant to this, we'll do this a little bit out of order because I had this down in miscellany, but I got a tweet from a clearly a listener of the podcast this morning, Bill Griffith, who said at SGGRC, he said, "Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers is on sale on Audible for $4.95.
I already bought it, yeah.
And he said, I got it. Excellent call. Thanks again for your recommendation.
This is the one that's about cortisol and stress, and yeah, it's great.
Well, yeah, it's one of the things that I've just sort of, as in my interest in health and longevity, I've recently been sort of looking at the whole issue of stress in people, in society, and so forth. So this is not written by, as some books like this are, by a so-called science writer. This is written by Robert Sapolsky. He's got a Wikipedia page which begins, Robert Morris Sapolsky, born 1957, is an American neuroendocrinologist, professor of biology, neuroscience, and neurosurgery at Stanford University, researcher and author.
So don't let
says
the
he's
name fool you, is what you're saying.
Yes, well, and also don't let the title fool you. This was recommended by someone who, it's like, okay, well, thank you for the recommendation. You know, why zebras don't get ulcers, you sort of think, okay, well, is it illustrated? Are there gonna be pictures with a zebra, you know, looking on, you know, sitting under a tree, gazing off into the distance? No, this is serious, wonderful, but also kind of humorous, but still very hard science about the nature of stress and the fact that the same sort of causes of traditional survival stress are being triggered by worries about credit card payments and mortgages and, you know, teenage daughters and, you know, the things that stress people out these days. And that the problem is that this sort of environmental stress isn't acute, it's chronic. And our body wasn't equipped to handle continuous low-level sort of background chronic stress. And all kinds of things go wrong. And there's an argument to be made that it's one of that stress in our lives is one of the major deleterious factors in long-term health. And anyway, for what it's worth, I completely agree with Bill. This is a great book, and so it is available everywhere and also on sale right now, or at least when he sent the tweet. I don't know how long it took him to read it or listen to it, but at the time it was $4.95. So don't use that for your free one. Use save this one for one you want to get on sale. But I recommend it as Bill did. So.
Audible does a lot of sales. I mean, we're no longer in the ad, but they do a lot of sales, and they do a lot of giveaways. I noticed they just have for free, if you're a member, which means if you signed up, you could get this for free. A brief history of holiday music. This is I've taken the great courses that Robert Greenberg does on hit music. It's the best thing ever. I mean, if you want to understand music, it's incredible. But he's got a little single chapter on holiday music, and I think I'm going to download this one because it's. He's great, and it's it adds to your appreciation to understand the history and the backstory to what's going on.
Oh, which is the case for like even classical music. If you understand the environment in which it was written, why it was created, what the point was, it makes it so much more easy to appreciate.
That's his classic course: how to listen to and understand great music. It's all about the origins of classical music, and I found so much great stuff. And yeah, it's wonderful. I've listened to this, and it's fantastic.
So our picture of the week on the front page of our show notes is Mozilla saying, we don't need Google's money anymore, which is, to me, comes as a huge relief because I still need Firefox. And I really believe that the industry needs Firefox in the way that it needs Chrome. Because Microsoft will have its browsers, Apple will have Safari, but these are our interfaces to the internet, and I see a role for Firefox, and so I was a little worried. I remember toward the end of last year when the announcement came, toward the end of 2014, that they were getting off of the Google gravy train. That essentially Google had been financing the Firefox browser, so. The good news is Mozilla has just posted their 2014 numbers, and they had revenue of $330 million, and that's up from 2013's revenue of $314 million. So they're not in trouble. This doesn't mean, oh, darn, Firefox is going to wither and die, which is, again, to me, I'm breathing a sigh of relief. And I know that a chunk of our listeners are diehard Firefox users, as I am. What, of course, Mozilla has done is they're getting a lot of revenue from the default settings of the search engine in the browser, and they've moved from a single Google global strategy into a regional search engine relationship strategy where they now have by default Yahoo as the search engine in the United States, Baidu in China, and Zandex in Russia. At the moment, Europe still uses Google by default, though not under a paid relationship with Google. So anyway, I saw this, it kind of flashed by, and I thought, oh, yay, good, because I want Firefox to endure. And I did want to just to acknowledge everyone's outrage at my suggesting last week that Apple being able to arrange to unlock locked iOS devices under court order seemed like a reasonable thing. I'm not changing my position. But I wanted everyone to know I heard them. I listened. I read all the outrage. Some people wrote blogs about it, specifically about my comment, and I read them to see if there was any point that I had missed. And it's not that I'm saying I don't want the iOS devices to absolutely remain as secure as they are today. It's that I'm watching Washington, and I know how politics goes, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief over the Obama administration's statement a month or so ago that they weren't going to push for sweeping cryptographic effort. But then we've got post-Paris attacks. Congress is rumbling again, and to me, if we had to give something, this seems like something in keeping with precedent. So, and again, we could be absolutist, but I think maybe some compromise will be warranted. Again, I'm not saying I want it, but I did want to acknowledge everybody who just fell out of their chairs, and as I knew some of our listeners would.
Incidentally, this just in, Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan, his wife, had their baby just a few hours ago. And
so now he's off for 2 months.
He's off for 2 months. Their baby daughter, Max, came into the world with a post on Facebook on Tuesday.
So Maxine is maybe the full name?
I don't know. It just says Max here, so.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But of course, it's the Daily Mail. I should probably read the Facebook post and see.
Well, congratulations to him and them.
Yeah.
So Microsoft has responded to the news we covered last week of Dell's dangerous certificates. And of course, Dell themselves sort of semi-reluctantly dragging their feet. Oh, this is not malware. This is not the same, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, fine. Anyway, Microsoft has a technology called the CTL, the Certificate Trust List, which has been present by default from Windows 8 onward, and which can be installed back at Vista and from Vista on, so Vista and Windows 7, and also on the synchronized server platforms. They just posted yesterday this notice, and in fact, because for Vista and 7 is not by default, I also made it the bit.ly link of the week, bit.ly/SN-536 will take you to this Microsoft page where Microsoft just wrote yesterday, Microsoft is aware of unconstrained digital certificates from Dell Inc. for which the private keys were inadvertently disclosed. One of these unconstrained certificates could be used to issue other certificates, impersonate other domains, or sign code. In addition, these certificates could be used to spoof content, perform phishing attacks, or perform man-in-the-middle attacks against Dell customers. This issue affects all supported releases of Microsoft Windows. Microsoft is not currently aware of attacks related to this issue. To help protect customers from potentially fraudulent use of these unconstrained digital certificates, the certificates have been deemed no longer valid by Dell Inc., and Microsoft is updating the certificate trust list for all supported releases of Microsoft Windows to remove the trust of these certificates. An automatic updater of certificate trust lists is included in supported editions of Windows 8, and then they go on from there, 8.1, RT 8.1, Windows Server 2012, 2012 R2, Windows 10, and so forth. And they even mentioned Windows 10 version 1511, which we know was just recently. And they said, oh, and for devices running Windows Phone 8 and on. Then they make it clear for Windows, for systems running Windows Vista, Windows 7, Server 2008, Server 2008 R2 that are using the automatic updater for certificate trust lists. And then they have a link to a knowledge base article. Customers do not need to take any action, as these systems will be automatically protected. But that was an addition. We talked about it at the time that it was released some time ago. If users are not sure, it certainly makes sense to, if you're still using Vista and 7, to add that to your system so that this and other future certificates can get yanked, can be essentially marked as untrusted preemptively by Microsoft in order to deal with this kind of problem. So it's a good thing that Microsoft did this. I noticed they are clearly happy with their relationship with Dell and were worded it accordingly. Yeah. So they didn't want to upset Dell.
Incidentally, I finished the long letter that Mark Zuckerberg wrote to his newborn daughter Max. At the end of it, kind of a stunner. He says, "We pledge we're going to give away 99% of our net worth in our lifetime for public good, including health and education initiatives." That's $45 billion. So, today. Yeah, who knows what it'll be over the length of time. So quite an astounding letter to his daughter that he posted on Facebook. It's very long, so it took me a while to get through it.
And if he holds back that last 1%, that's what, $500 million?
Yeah, no,
so
that's plenty.
That's still plenty.
Yeah, and Bill Gates did the same thing, by the way. He pledged he would give away all but 1% of his value. And I think that they're setting a very good precedent and standard for these tech billionaires. Because
and there's a group of people who are all doing this, right?
Yeah, well, Bill Gates has created a group trying to lobby other wealthy tech folks to do this. We will give 99%.
And Warren Buffett and so forth.
Yep, with mixed success, oddly. We will give 99% of our Facebook shares, currently about $45 billion, during our lives to advance this mission of personalized learning, curing disease, connecting people, and building strong communities. That's just really great. Amazing.
That's neat.
Yeah.
So, Arris cable modems in the doghouse.
Yeah, because, I went out and bought an Arris to replace the modem that I was using, my Comcast supplied modem. Motorola bought Arris not so long ago.
Correct. And Motorola has had a good name and label. In fact, that's what I was using until my friend at Cox said, "Oh, no, you need this Netgear CM600." That's the one that I mentioned a couple weeks ago that it's got so many bands. I'm measuring 300 megabits down and 30 megabits up, and it's like, okay, thank you. That's 100 times what I had with my two T1s. So welcome Gibson to the 21st century. So here's the story. It has been known since 2009 that there is a type of backdoor in Arris modems. It's a daily changing password based on a seed, which is in the firmware, such that the firmware algorithm generates the password of the day. And so it is possible, if you know the seed and what day it is, to potentially access these cable modems remotely. The various news coverages is calling this a double backdoor because there's a second password you need, but it turns out that is simply and always the lower 5 digits of the device's serial number, which can be obtained without knowing it. So once you know that, and if you happen to know the seed used in the algorithm to generate the daily password, you've got a problem. Turns out, most of the manufacturers never change the seed.
Of course not.
They leave it set to the default.
Of course they do.
Of
too much
course
work.
they do.
This is getting to be an old story, isn't it?
It really is. You know, all capitals. Write this down. MPSJKMDHAI. That's the seed. And that's what all the modems use. And so all the bad guys know it. So the history here is that recently Bernardo Rodrigues, who is a vulnerability tester with Brazil's Globo TV network, he was looking at the firmware in some of his company's cable modems, which they were going to be providing. And he found an undocumented library, libaris_password.so. It provides this backdoor, which allows, given that you had this information, privileged remote login, given that you know what day it is. So he then did he looked at 3 different models, the TG862A, the TG860A, and the DG860A. All 3 of those have the firmware, have this vulnerability, and using the Shodan search engine that we've talked about often. Shodan is this unnervingly powerful. It's like Google for Internet of Things, or Google for everything on the net, where it's indexing not web pages and websites the way Google does. It's indexing anything that responds to packets anywhere on the internet. It has found more than 600,000 of these devices publicly. Well, of course, a cable modem is public. It's publicly facing. So whereas their IP address may change, that is, so Shodan may not be good for absolutely nailing for sure a device by IP, because as we know, ISPs can and periodically do, or at least may, change the IP address on specific physical modems at customer premises. Still, there's way over 500,000 of these. And you can imagine now that this news is public, that the bad guys are going to start having a field day. So this guy did contact Arris and asked him not to reveal details about the modem's password generation algorithm. And he didn't, but he doesn't need to, because this is the problem with these sorts of things, is it relies on secrets. And we know, well, it relies on a secret which is unfortunately identical for every single, unless changed, for every single modem. Now, it's worth noting that Comcast told DSL reports that they don't use the default. So until everyone finds out what Comcast uses, right, Comcast subscribers will be safe. But as soon as someone looks in their firmware and figures out what Comcast is using, then again we have a problem. So the lesson here is that it just, there's no way to offer something like this with anything that is universally defaulted. I would argue that the biggest problem is that these backdoors are in place and may well not even be used. No one may be using them. So here's like a feature, a bullet point, which was made available for the cable providers that allow them to access for who knows why. Maybe that's the way they update their firmware. You can also this does create. Bernardo wrote a full BusyBox Telnet SSH shell session that allows you to do anything you want to on this. So these little guys are running some version of Linux, and or a small Unix or something, and this lets anybody get in. So the only way to do this safely, if this is what you want to do, is the random number per device, where, for example, when a cable company first pairs themselves up with the cable modem, they generate a random number, they stick it in the cable box, and they make a note of it in the associated file. And of course, now the problem is if you lose or forget that random number, you'd have to tell the customer, hold the reset button down to do a factory restore or something like that. But there isn't a way to equip 600,000 devices, no matter how clever you are. I mean, you could say clearly they tried to be clever. They created a seed that generates the sequence. The sequence creates a changing everyday password. Then they also, beyond that, they also use the lower 5 digits of the serial number. So, okay, the problem is once that becomes out, once that information escapes, now everybody has access to 600,000 cable modems and can get up to all kind of mischief. So the problem is this is the kind of secret that is never kept. It cannot be preserved. So the only way to do this is, for example, maybe have it disabled by default. If the number is blank, then the backdoor is not even open. Or if a cable provider wants to do it, then generate a random number rather than a clever algorithm, because then at least every single one of these 600,000 cable modems would have a large, absolutely unknown random number that is associated with nothing else, not with the modem, with the vendor, with nothing, completely random. And it would be as good as any of our crypto is in terms of protecting that, with the obligation that it somehow needs to be, that random number cannot be algorithmically generated. In fact, the cable modem company cannot have a secret algorithm that generates it, because once again, when that gets loose, that one algorithm, then all the devices that were keyed by that algorithm are vulnerable. It's got to be just pull a number out of the air. It's the only way to do it securely. And so, again, who knows? This is a great lesson about security and how to do it wrong, and why even being this clever didn't work. You can't be. You have to, if you're going to have the security, you have to sacrifice the convenience. But then you get real security. Blackberry says no to Pakistan.
Yay.
Yes. Pakistan, I think it was earlier this year, was in July, said to Blackberry, we give you till the end of November to give us full, unfettered, was the word they used, access to BlackBerry's servers. BlackBerry said no then. The deadline has been extended by 1 month. Pakistan said, maybe you didn't hear us correctly. So we'll give you through December 30th. Then we're not kidding. BlackBerry still says no. So they had said previously they would pull out of Pakistan rather than comply with a demand for full access to content on the BlackBerry Enterprise service. The company says the Pakistani government wants the ability to monitor all traffic in the country, including every BES email and BES Blackberry Messenger message. BES communications, Blackberry says, are routed through the company's servers in Canada. Blackberry did say they'd be willing to work with Pakistani authorities to protect public safety, but that the privacy of its customers is paramount and something on which it will not compromise. Marty Beard is BlackBerry's chief of operations and said that the company recognizes the need to cooperate with lawful government investigations of criminal activity, but they have never permitted wholesale access to BlackBerry servers. And we'll remember, because we talked about this 5 years ago, that back in 2010, BlackBerry was still relevant when I was carrying a BlackBerry and loving the little physical keyboard. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE were threatening to ban BlackBerry if they didn't provide essentially the same technology after various terrorist activities that they felt would give them the visibility they need. BlackBerry never complied, but did arrange a compromise more along the lines of on a case-by-case basis, we'll consider individual requests. So it'll be interesting to track this. I mean, this is a fascinating aspect of the times that we're in, as we know, with this fundamental tension between governmental need to have access to communications and the prevalent, the trivial it has become capability of technology to make that impossible. So, okay, now Leo. Oh,
I love it.
trolls.
I love it I know something's coming when you do that. All right, I'm ready. Yes.
Yeah, patent troll. When you hear the Eastern District of Texas,
Always.
yeah,
Always.
mixed in with patents, we know we're in trouble. We've discussed this before. There's some strange court in the Eastern District of Texas that just thinks that anybody with a patent is golden. Doesn't matter anything else about it. You nasty infringers. What do you think you're doing? You're robbing these companies of their livelihood. And in fact, remember that Samsung has been the victim of this court, so much so that Samsung began sponsoring the sports events, like built them a stadium and had Samsung on the Lexan panels around the fencing in order to say, look, we're good guys. Please stop picking on us. Okay, this is really interesting. I don't know, and this is going to be another interesting thing to track, because this company, CryptoPeak, has sued 66, says the press, but I checked, and it's now 67 because there was one that was filed on the 25th. So this is a patent which was originally filed on May 28th of 97. So quite a while ago. And as patents go, this, it took a few years. Typically, the patent, you send it off and then you wait a year. Then they come back and they say, yeah, we're denying this for the following reasons. Then you and your patent attorneys get together and you explain basically to the Patent and Trademark Office why their interpretation of what you said isn't correct, or why the prior art samples that they have shown don't apply to your invention. So you go back and forth a few times, and as happened on March 13th, 2001, okay, so like 4 years later, almost 4 years later, this patent was granted. Now, patents have a life of 17 years currently. So that means this was granted on March 13th, 2001. It will expire on March 13th, 2018. So here we are about to start 2016. So a little more than 2 years. 28 months, something like that, 27 months. So these guys, apparently earlier this year, Adam and Marcel Young, Y-U-N-G, apparently sold this for, we don't know what the terms and conditions were, to this company, CryptoPeak, that has no presence on the internet, is not actually apparently using the patent that they purchased, which has 27 months left of life on it before it expires. Instead, they've decided, starting in July of this year, so this summer or early summer, to start suing people who they believe infringe this patent. Now, what's controversial about this is that by their reading of the patent they purchased, the use of elliptic curve cryptography is a breach of this patent. So they've sued Sony, Macy's, AT&T, Pinterest, Netflix, Yahoo, Hyatt Hotels, Priceline, Best Western, Expedia, GoPro, of all people, Progressive Insurance, and about 50 others. And in fact, Leo, there's a link here in the show notes, the search.rpxcorp.com. If you click that, it'll bring up a list of what was 66 is now 67 companies, and they're all major, large companies that are doing secure transactions on the internet. I mean, all these companies. Sony needs to have security. Macy's, AT&T, and so forth. I mean, so it's
a lot of retailers too, though, like Barnes and Noble and Bath Body and Beyond. I mean, that's kind of an interesting. Kohl's, Groupon, Shutterfly, Netflix, Etsy. Holy cow!
Yeah, I mean, and there's no particular logic to it.
No, Macy's, Voodoo. I mean, it's weird.
Yeah, well, although you'll notice like Priceline, Best Western, Expedia, sort of like they say, oh, let's go after the online travel companies, and so they probably go over to SSL Labs and see whether those companies are using elliptic curve crypto, and if so, they rubber stamp the complaint that they've already synthesized. And in fact, if you look at the dates, you can see they're in batches.
Yeah.
There's like a whole bunch in one batch.
Very
and then
easy and cheap to do this. A few $100s to file these. By the way, notice the number of closed suits. That means they've settled. They didn't go to trial. They just gave them money.
I know.
And that bankrolls the rest of the suits. So
I know.
Yeah. Wow. 67 defendants.
So the complaint says, I mean, it even says this: upon information and belief, defendant has infringed and continues to directly infringe one or more claims of and it's called the 150 patent. In patent litigation, they typically just refer to the long number, which is now 7 digits, by its last 3 digits. So this is the one, it ends in 150. The 150 patent, including at least claim 1, by actions comprising making, having made, and or using one or more websites that operate in compliance with the standards of elliptic curve cryptography, (ECC), cipher suites for the transport layer security, (TLS), protocol, which is now in says the accused instrumentalities. A representative example of a website of defendant that operates in compliance with this standard is, and in this case, it was livevol.com, is secure.livevol.com. So anyway, this is much in the news. I got a bunch of tweets about it yesterday and more today. Because it's beginning to be picked up. Of course, the Register jumped on it immediately with their particular, style, and then ZDNet picked up on it, and hopefully it's the kind of thing that the EFF will decide they want to deal with. I mean, this is and I should mention that Netflix has filed a motion to dismiss, alleging that this is, and I have, and in the show notes is a copy of their motion if anyone's interested. So the problem, well, of course, there are many problems with our current patent system, but one is that anybody can be sued, and even defending yourself against a specious lawsuit is not inexpensive, as Leo, you have found out, because there was the patent troll who was going after podcasters for a while, right?
God, he's gone. Yep.
Yeah. But one of the interesting things about patent law is that you don't have. It's not the designer of the invention. I'm sorry. It's not. It's the person using the invention, even if, for example, none of these companies designed this or wrote it or recreated it. Microsoft wrote the crypto suite in Windows, and an open source community wrote the crypto in OpenSSL. Yet the users of that are, the way patent law is, responsible for their use of a technology which may be subject to patent. So it would hopefully all these companies and any others that are named will band together, pool their resources, and arrange to get this resolved in a way that minimizes the expense that any of them have to go through. Because you get sued, you have to defend yourself.
Yeah,
and
settle. Yeah.
And
they always try to price it so it's cheaper to settle than defend yourself.
Yes, I didn't spend enough time with this to parse this, and boy, it is impenetrable legalese. I mean, you would need Denise to go into this and figure out what it means. But it looks to me like it doesn't in fact bear on the technology, but unfortunately that doesn't matter, because exactly as you said, Leo, it is cheaper to write these people a check and have the lawsuit go away, as some of the smaller companies appear to have done, than it is to argue in court. Because boy, the you're talking tens of thousands of dollars immediately before you even stand up and say, Your Honor. And it's a shame that that's the way the system is set up, and that companies like this are allowed to operate as they are. So, as TechCrunch put it, Flash gets another nail in its coffin. Adobe just announced today that or maybe it was yesterday, that they are renaming what has always been called Adobe Flash Professional to Adobe Animate CC. And I guess CC must be what? Content creator? I'm just guessing.
No, Creative Cloud.
Creative Cloud. I did see that terminology there, too.
That's their phrase for their subscription service, basically.
Okay, so what they said was, and they were clearly a little self-conscious about this, they said, for nearly 2 decades, Flash Professional has been the standard for producing rich animations on the web. Because of the emergence of HTML5 and demand for animations that leverage web standards, we completely rewrote the tool over the past few years to incorporate native HTML5 canvas and WebGL support. To more accurately represent its position as the premier animation tool for the web and beyond, Flash Professional will be renamed Adobe Animate CC, starting with the next release in early 2016. They said today, over a third of all content created in Flash Professional uses HTML5, reaching over 1 billion devices worldwide. It has also been recognized as an HTML5 ad solution that complies with the latest Interactive Advertising Bureau, that's the IAB as we know, standards, and is widely used in the cartoon industry by powerhouse studios like Nickelodeon and Titmouse, Inc. Animate CC will continue supporting Flash, SWF, and AIR formats as first-class citizens. In addition, it can output animations to virtually any format, including scalable vector graphics, through its extensible architecture. So this is just good news. This is Adobe saying, well, I mean, for example, as we know, Flash won't run on any iOS devices. And Leo, I heard you mention in your previous podcast, MacBreak Weekly, the percentage of Black Friday sales that went through iOS.
Yeah, it was like 80-something, right?
83%,
84%. Amazing.
Right. So although, we note that that iOS instances are dwarfed by Android, in terms of dollar volume transactions happening on them, iOS dwarfs Android. And so the fact that iOS won't run Flash means that, ads can't, Flash-based ads won't work on the mobile platform, whereas HTML5 can. So I think it's clear that, it's going to take it a long time to go away. It always takes these things forever to finally disappear, but they're probably going to. And I found a nice note that lets me explain something that I wanted to about SpinRite from just 2 days ago. Cornell DeLorean, who is in my hometown, San Mateo, California, his note as I'm going through the mailbag for the Q&A said, "SpinRite saves the day again." He wrote, "Hi, Steve. I'm a longtime listener and owner of SpinRite. I purchased my copy back in 2009 to support you and the podcast. But I also figured at some point I would get a chance to rescue a disc, and after all these years, that time came. I was helping a friend with his laptop. It was running slow and hanging. So after poking around for a bit and removing some unneeded and expired software from McAfee and so forth, I rebooted, and it refused to boot up. I tried every trick I learned from doing many years of desktop support, but nothing worked. So I thought, let's see if SpinRite can save the day. I started the scan on level 2, and it happily got to 48% after about 40 minutes. But then it slowed way down. It ran overnight, and by morning, it was at 51%. When I got home from work at the end of the day, it had crawled up to 53. I let it run overnight again, and it was finally finished when I checked it in the morning. I rebooted it with fingers crossed, and sure enough, it booted right up. I backed up all of his data and advised him it was time for a new laptop. And then he says, but it ran fine for a number of months until he did get a replacement. Thanks for such a great product and podcast. So I just wanted to take this opportunity. This is like a perfect case history of, SpinRite zipping along to halfway, to nearly halfway, 48%, where it encountered trouble. And then it sat there and just essentially refused to take no for an answer from the drive. And it was clearly slow for a while, from like maybe 48% to somewhere past half, like 53. So had it never hit trouble, it would have, zipped all the way through, and maybe even fixed some things that were less recalcitrant. In this case, it had to really struggle. But this was a case of, all or nothing for this person. And so he let it go. It fixed the problem. The drive worked fine, and he eventually replaced the laptop. So the problem that SpinRite has is that it actually has to read all of the sectors on the drive in order to check them all. And drives have gotten so big today, nothing does that anymore. Not even formatting. Formatting doesn't read the drive. It used to back when it could. But, Microsoft said, wait, we can't take a week to format a drive any longer. So we're just going to do the so-called quick format, What the quick format does is just lay down the architecture of the format. It lays down the root directory and the various tables at the front of the drive, and bitmaps showing all sectors unallocated. And then it says, okay, it's formatted. That's the quick format. So the problem is drives, as we know, are becoming ridiculously large. The good news is, in the work I did on the next release of SpinRite, which will be 6.1, the first thing I did was look at speed and performance, and made, through some really fun trickery, a huge increase in performance. It clocked at 2 hours per terabyte. That is to say, half a terabyte per hour. So that makes it feasible to run SpinRite on a 4 terabyte drive overnight in 8 hours, which makes it, supremely practical. As I've said before, we're making good progress with Squirrel. I'm finishing the rewrite of the semantics page, which actually required a rewrite because we had changed so many things down here toward the ends, simplifying it, tightening it, just really nailing it. And as soon as we get SpinRite out the door, released, then I'm back to, did I say SpinRite? I meant Squirrel, sorry. As soon as I got Squirrel out the door, then I'm back to working on 6.1 and getting it into everyone's hands, as I have said, for a free upgrade that will give us this performance boost. So I thank everyone for their patience. And in the meantime, it's still rescuing drives every day.
Very nice. I have questions. Are you ready? We're going to take a little break. When we come back, Steve will answer those questions. Our show today brought to you by Braintree. If you're a mobile app developer and you are looking to add a payments solution, even the best mobile app won't work right without the right payments API. You got to check out Braintree. Developers all over the world have embraced the Braintree V.0 SDK is the best, the easiest way to add secure mobile payments to their apps and website. And by the way, your users love it because it accepts any kind of payment. Yeah, Apple Pay, Android Pay, PayPal, Venmo, credit cards, even Bitcoin. And the nice thing is when a new payment method comes along, it's so easy for you. Well, when Android Pay came around, finally was released last month, you just go to your Braintree control panel, check the box that says Android Pay, boom, resubmit the app, you're done. No wonder Airbnb uses Braintree. Uber uses Braintree. So does Lyft. So does GitHub. You've used those. You've used Braintree. And that V.0 SDK is so sweet because it means it's very easy for your customers. The Braintree's buyable pins on Pinterest, that's Braintree. Braintree. Simple, secure payments, easy to integrate code, just a few lines. You put it right in there. It works in any platform, Android, iOS, JavaScript, so it works on the web. SDKs come in .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, Ruby. 10 lines of code in your app. All of it, Braintree does the hard stuff, including, by the way, keep it secure. And if you don't have the time, give them a call. They'll handle the integration for you. Check out the sandbox and get your first $50,000 in payments fee-free. Yeah? BraintreePayments.com/security now. Just go look. I think, when you start to look at it, you go, yeah, this is it. This is obvious. It's a no-brainer. BraintreePayments.com/security now. We love them. I thank them personally for making Uber such a great experience, and we thank them for their support of the Security Now show. Let me open the magic PDF, and we'll get your Q&A fired up. We start in Hamburg, Germany. Michael Walther notes assembly language is climbing the charts. The top 10 of programming languages. This is TIOB software, the TIOB index.
Check out that link. I know that you're a fan of languages, Leo.
Oh, I always look at this. I look at this all the time because I find it fascinating.
Yes.
And I guess the way they do this is the courses, third-party vendors, engineers worldwide, search engines. They have a methodology that I think is pretty good. We're not talking about best programming language, you're talking about literally lines of code that have been written. And, of course, Java.
Well, and so,
one still.
What's interesting is Java is number one. And I wonder if you think, I know that it's used in corporations because it is still a multi-platform language. You put the Java runtime on a system, and then you're able to, host your applications anywhere. But I'm wondering also if it might be Android, which is, Android apps.
It's the language of choice for Android. So
yeah,
you can use other apps, other languages, and Java's the main one. What's interesting is C is still number 2.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And in fact, if you scroll past the bottom of that chart, there's an interesting graphic that shows the evolution of language popularity over time. Java's
been going down and then went up. It's really interesting. This climb here from, it had been declining. This sudden climb, I really think has to be Android.
I think it has to be. Yes.
Android, right? C has been steady for since 2001. It's been
C is the language.
Yeah.
I mean that is it's like the because it's flexible enough, multi-platform, yet it's also highly transportable when you wrap it with the right libraries.
Yeah.
Really, I thought that was really and to Michael's point, assembly, and I don't quite understand why it's there, but it's like number 11.
Number 11.
The bottom of the top 10 is Perl, which is slipping a little bit. Ruby on its way up. VB.NET is there at number 8. JavaScript just above it at number 7. But assembly language is 11. Now, of course, that doesn't say which chip assembly.
Right.
And I'm wondering if it might be, for example, like ARM assembler for all the Internet of Things. Sometimes
that's what
you're
it is.
running very memory constrained environments where you can't afford Linux and you can't afford, the inefficiency of any compilation. All compilers are generating code much bigger than somebody who writes an assembler. So I'm thinking that, for example, the little button that Amazon sells, well, it makes sense to them to have the code written in assembly because then they can dramatically shrink the chip by using much smaller ROM, and that absolutely maps to cost. So in high volume, highly cost sensitive areas, assembly language is still what people are going to use because there's no way to get more efficient. And I bet that's driving the interest, or at least, even though it's not in the top 10, it's number 11.
That's amazing, really.
Yeah.
Although, if you look at number 12, Delphi, you realize, okay. Then Visual Basic. Objective-C, which is Apple's language for iOS, surprisingly, number 14, and plummeting was number 3 last year.
But how could COBOL be number 20? And coming up?
Up and coming. It's an up-and-comer. COBOL. R, plummeting. PL, Pascal, MATLAB, Swift is coming up. Interesting, though, the plummet in Objective-C, I guess that's the growth of Swift it's directly comparable to the growth of Swift. But
yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating.
I just always think it's sort of interesting. It's sort of the social network within the developer ecosystem.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I love that stuff, frankly. Thank you, Michael, for the TIOB index, TIOB.
Yes, I don't think it's my assembler, though. I don't think it's x86. I have a feeling it's...
I bet not. I wish they would tell us by processor.
Yeah, I think it's probably little embedded things.
Yeah, you're right.
And unfortunately, Intel has like 0 penetration in there at the moment. They're trying to get in, but still not there yet.
Yeah. Justin in Austin hit a snag with HSTS and router redirection. He says, the other night, my internet connection went... Oops, that's the wrong lower third. Let me put yours up. There we go. The other night, my internet connection went down, but the symptoms were surprising. I was attempting to navigate to a site I frequent, which, unknown to me, uses HSTS. The result was my web browser informing me the site was known to use HSTS and was attempting to serve me a non-secured page. And the browser said, that's it. It completely prevented me from viewing the insecure page with no other option. Eventually, I discovered, hey, it was not my browser. It was my router intercepting the web page request and returning its own no connection, please contact support page. But the browser's protective interface masked the true problem. If all sites implemented HSTS, it would have taken me longer to figure out. I guess I'm just writing to say this was a surprising interaction between my router and HSTS. I imagine a Wi-Fi network that has one of these click to agree to our terms redirects might show the same symptom. What's going on?
Yeah, this is really interesting. And we would broadly categorize this as another one of these things where the best intentions of fixing stuff that's wrong don't always work perfectly. So HSTS, of course, is the HTTP strict transport security. That's the reply header which a site, a web service, a web server can provide to a browser declaring that it's able to always and wants to only have secure connections. The browser caches, that is to say, remembers that declaration. And that gives the browser permission to promote any non-secure queries it might have otherwise made to that server to HTTPS. So Justin surfs around the net, as any of us do, and his browser requires knowledge of all of the HSTS sites, like grc.com. Mine's one of them. And then something happens. He loses his internet connection, which causes his router to display an intercept page. But the router's trying to be helpful. The router is showing a page saying, hey, I've lost connection to the internet. But it's not secure. So because the router is intercepting the browser's attempt to connect to a secure site, the browser interprets the lack of security, which is not coming from the site, but is coming from the router, as a failure of HSTS and puts up the wrong message. The browser doesn't say, I couldn't get to the internet, because it got to something. It got to the router that intercepted the legitimate attempt to get to the site over a secure connection. And so the browser says, oh, sorry, this site that you're trying to get to, there's something wrong, because it said only connect to me securely, and we tried, and it's not accepting a secure connection. Well, because the router intercepted it. So again, this is sort of one of those unforeseen side effects of a system which is we're trying to make more secure, but this whole concept of HSTS, we have to call it a kludge. Yes, it's a useful kludge. It's giving us more security. As we know, it's preventing the problem of a bad guy being a man in the middle and stripping the HTTPSs out of all of the responses coming from a site in order to strip the security and be able to, for example, acquire session cookies when an unwitting user logs in. So this was sort of, there was an edge case of a problem where the industry's response was, oh, we could fix that. And so this kludge, useful and workable, but still, an afterthought, was added to the HTTPS and generally sort of the web protocol to enforce security through this clever mechanism. And unfortunately, it was a little too clever for its own good. And exactly as Justin notes, If you went to a web portal that was trying to intercept you, I would imagine that you'd get the same sort of confusion from the browser. Now, maybe if this becomes more prevalent, browsers will just do a better job at explaining the situation. The browser could understand better what's going on and present something that is less confusing. And Justin's point about, if all websites were doing this, what he meant was he just tried a different site and it worked. So, I'm sorry, he tried a different site and it didn't work because the problem was not the site he was trying to get to. The problem was he lost his internet connection. Unfortunately, that was being masked by this kludge that was all put in place in order to keep us more secure. Yes.
2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yes, and if we keep doing it, we do actually make progress.
Yeah, bit by bit.
But not always as fast as we want.
Walt in San Fernando Valley wonders about DDoS attacks. We've all heard of DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks against individuals and businesses. I've never heard of an ISP being attacked. Is such an attack possible? If so, why are bad guys not doing it? Or maybe ISPs just don't tell us when they're attacked. Many thanks.
So this is sort of an interesting question, and I think there's a couple answers to it. Normally, DDoS attacks are an attack launched by an individual or group against an entity for some perceived cause, some perceived slight of some kind. So, it's like company X does something that this group disagrees with philosophically and attacks them. So my point is that ISPs who are generally just carriers of content are by that nature less targets of people's angst, I think, which is not to say that people can't also get upset with ISPs, but that's part 2 of this, is that the nature of a distributed denial of service attack is that traffic coming from all over the world typically is concentrated through many different ISPs down finally to the subscriber's ISP and then to the subscriber. And depending upon the size of the attack, the ISP's routers at some point generally get overwhelmed when the concentration of traffic begins to saturate the bandwidth capability of either the router or the outbound links from the router, so that it just can't allow all the traffic through. So ISPs are sort of indirectly attacked when any of their customers are attacked. But exactly as Walt also suggests, maybe they're just too big. What they are mostly is a large ISP will have, as we talked about, peering with other ISPs or tier 1 providers, will have many different contact points around the internet. And an ISP, so the many different contact points means that the traffic is far more diffuse in nature. And I mean, I guess you could attack an ISP's website. I was about to say that an ISP doesn't have an IP address in the same way that one of their clients has an IP address. An ISP has large blocks of IPs, which are then assigned to their customers. So you could certainly attack an ISP's website where it lives, but by its nature, an ISP itself is potentially millions of IP addresses rather than just one. So there really isn't anything to attack. And even if there were, the traffic is inherently spread out to a much greater degree. So I just sort of think they're sort of part of the cloud, and they're sort of part of the fuzziness that you attack through rather than trying to attack it itself, because it's sort of amorphous.
Makes sense. Greg Penn, Oakland, CA, wonders about blocking ads only from running scripts. By the way, I don't know if you heard triangulation yesterday. We talked.
Did not have a chance to catch it, but I know that you had those guys on.
The two people from AdBlock Plus. We talked about the acceptable ads policy and all of that, and then Dean Murphy, who is the guy behind the Crystal ad blocker on iOS.
Right.
And it was a really good conversation, I thought. Along the lines of stuff we'd talked about before.
Sure.
But in some detail. So that was yesterday's triangulation. Anyway,
it's one of the other tensions that we have in the industry right now.
Yeah. Greg writes, Steve, I've been listening, mostly reading actually, thanks to Elaine's work, to Security Now for a few years. I find the discussions about ad blocking to be very useful and interesting for the different perspectives everyone has on it. I was wondering if it makes sense to try to have a lighter touch on ad blocking by combining it with suppressing scripting. Instead of blocking third-party data like ads, stopping scripting, or both, what about blocking only scripts that come from third-party sites? Wouldn't that improve security? Would it prevent the website owner from getting credit for the ad view? You could still see most ads without them running Flash or JavaScript. But it would be a lot less annoying. And finally, do any current or ad or script blockers include this functionality? And then I think you have a screenshot here of uBlock Origin.
Yeah. So yes. The current favorite tool of mine and many now of our listeners is uBlock Origin, and it does have specifically, and this screenshot shows it, there's a line item there, third-party scripts. And it's not normally accessible to a user until you turn the advanced mode. So you need to go to whichever browser you have it installed, whichever one you're using it on, to the configuration. And on Firefox, it's I'm looking at it, it says, I am an advanced user, which is not checked by default. You turn that on, and then you will find some little plus and minus signs to the left of the requests blocked and the domains connected verbiage on the UI. If you click that, it opens this whole next level of drill down panel. And one of the items there is third-party scripts. Now, conservative as the author of uBlock Origin is, this is not enabled by default. You can experiment with it because he has both local and global settings in the way this operates. If you're not familiar with this, check back on the podcast where we covered uBlock Origin in much greater detail because there is per site and global options. So you could block third-party scripts and see how it goes. The problem is that ads which may detect that they're being blocked use third-party are third-party sourced, and many ads are now using scripts. We've talked about this. I mean, it's for me, it's an annoyance, which is why I've brought uBlock Origin up, and I'm unfortunately feeling I need to block pretty much everything. Although I am, making static exceptions for sites where I want to support them, and it looks like that they're doing what they can to have a useful ad policy. But for what it's worth, uBlock Origin is an example. It gives you all the bells and whistles that you need in order to say, I'm going to try blocking third-party scripts and see how it goes.
uBlock Origin to the rescue once again. Brett in Dubai wonders whether we ever really even needed TrueCrypt. I've completed my off-site backup moments ago, and I suddenly realized I'm completely happy with using my Mac encrypted file system on removable disks. He's talking about Apple's File Vault, I guess. It's easy, and as far as I know, secure. I was using TrueCrypt on your recommendation for years, and was really upset when it became unsupported. So I switched to using the ready-made built-in OS encryption system in Mac. Actually, systems, because Mac uses File Vault, Windows uses BitLocker. Yep. Do you think they're good enough, or are we missing something?
I I guess the question is, what's your need? What's your application? That is, what degree of encryption assurance do you want? I think they're absolutely good enough to protect your content in the cloud, to protect your backup, and to protect your system. I can't help but be nervous about BitLocker. I don't know. Microsoft I have a less of a feeling of comfort with Microsoft than I do with Apple. I think Apple has, maybe just because Apple has been so vocal and so adamant about their stance on their enforcement of user privacy, and I understand what they're saying. Microsoft doesn't say anything, and so I don't feel like I have the same sense of confidence from Microsoft. But yes, they're strong encrypted file systems. I think you are always in an absolutist sense, always better off using an open source third-party solution, just because it's better if it comes from somewhere else. So if we're absolute ultimate security, but I don't know that everyone absolutely needs that. And there's a huge convenience factor in simply turning on the Mac file vault and having an encrypted file system. I really think it's fine.
Steve's not being blunt enough. If you're worried about government, then you might not want to use a corporate solution, a closed source corporate solution, because, and I don't care if it's Apple or Microsoft, whatever they say or don't say, both are subject to U.S. law.
Yeah.
And both may be required to provide a backdoor in their encryption. So if it's government, the U.S. government you're worried about, then open source would be safer. I've always said if you're going to use encryption, use open source, but it is a lot less convenient. And people have, no, I wasn't talking to you, Siri. We have, I don't know why she woke up. Apple wanted to hear what I had to say. Okay, did you get that, Apple? That's really the issue, right? If you're not, if you're worried about, just common garden variety thieves and snoops, right, of course, File Vault and BitLocker are fine.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
the U.S. government. That's the difference.
Yes.
Ronnie in Montgomery, Alabama has an idea for fingerprint scanning. I just had a wild idea, says Ronnie. I've liked the idea of fingerprint scanning. I don't like the idea of it being the only form of unlocking my phone, because I can be compelled to use my finger to unlock it. But what if the fingerprint scanner were programmed to check 2 or even 3 prints for multiple fingers? Only I would know which fingers and in which order. No one would be able to just cut off my index finger, thinking that was the one that unlocks it. It would be something I know. Oh, because only he would know the orders.
The sequence.
Yeah. So I couldn't be compelled to reveal the exact pattern. Oh, that's clever. This, of course, would be very practical, but for the ones who require that extra level of security, this could be an ideal solution. What do you think? Be gentle if it's dumb.
So I don't think it's dumb, but I think that probably the answer is a little simpler, and that is to have a panic mode finger. So I hesitate to say that you would give your phone the finger if the authorities wanted you to unlock it. But I doubt that it's the kind of thing that we would see Apple support. But it sort of feels like the thing that maybe Android could offer, where you would register the finger that you intend to use for unlocking, and then you would register the panic finger. And if you really wanted to be safe, your regular finger would be unusual, like the pinky on your non-dominant hand, so that no one would expect that to be your normal unlock finger. And what would expected to be your normal unlock finger, like your dominant hand index finger or thumb, that would be the panic. And so you would comply. You would say, oh, okay, fine, you got me. I'll unlock my phone. And you just give it one finger, and now it's bricked, essentially. I think that's probably the practical way, only because, doing a multiple finger salute every time you want to unlock your phone probably would get tiresome. If you had to do, 3 different fingers in sequence, I mean, yeah, you'd feel like James Bond, but I think you get tired of being James Bond pretty quickly.
Let's take a break and come back with four more questions from our
Yep.
beautiful audience. But first, a little bit of a word from our beautiful sponsor. And we're talking, of course, about the folks at IT Pro TV. IT Pro TV is a great solution for people who are in IT and want to polish up their skills or keep them polished, or people who want to get a cert so they can get into IT, or people just like you who are, want to know this stuff, like to learn this stuff. IT Pro TV is a video network, much like Twit, but it's dedicated to the world of information technology. So it's for people who want to get started in IT or, and want to get those certs, or people want to get new certs. Over 1,000 hours of content, 2 studios, 50 hours every week of new content in every area. You can watch them live on your Roku, your Chromecast, your computer, your mobile device. You can watch them on demand. Course topics include A+, CCNA, MCSA, CISSP, network security. You can get the certified ethical hacker, cryptography, desktop and server support for OS X, Windows, and Linux. They just added Cisco Firepower and Advanced Fireside Administration courses. Those are by Todd Lammerly. I told you he's the guy, right? The guy who wrote the book. The new updated CISSP is coming the week of December 14th. Adam Gordon will be back. Great teachers who not only, are the authorities on it, but know their stuff and can teach it. You can watch live, be in the chat room, ask questions. They have so many value adds, too. They, Q&A study sessions that you can get the step-by-step virtual machine labs. They've got 100 of those. You can practice the exams with the new Transcender practice exams. That's worth $109 all by itself. You pay once a month, a low subscription fee, less than a couple of study books, and a lot less than a technical school, or buy it by the year and get some additional benefits, 2 months free, plus the ability to download and watch offline. And these guys are geeks. They know, they understand, they have a no-hassle cancellation policy. It's very easy to cancel when you're done. Group pricing for universities and corporations is also available. Harvard uses it, MIT, UCSD, Stanford, they all are subscribers. itpro.tv. Go to itpro.tv/security now, and you can subscribe. Normally it's $57 a month. If you buy the year, $570. But we've got a very nice special offer. First of all, try it free for 7 days when you sign up with the code SN30. And then when you begin your subscription, you'll get 30% off forever. That brings the cost down to $40 a month, or $3.99 for the entire year. That's like, what, $32 a month. It's a good deal. itpro.tv/security now. Use the code SN30 to get 30% off. Oh, did I mention? Forever. itpro.tv. Tim and Don and the gang, they're great. We love them. They came to us early on, and together we've gone a long way, baby. We think it's a great solution, and we thank them for their support. itpro.tv/security now. Let them know you heard it on Security Now with Steve Gibson. Continuing on with yet another question for you, Mr. G, via a private tweet from someone who wishes to keep his identity private. A little DM action here. He writes, I never thought I'd be caught by crypto wall. Oh, no, but it happened. However, it happened because of a Windows feature I didn't know about, the Microsoft Windows scripting host, OWSH. I was looking at a JavaScript file sent to me in a bogus email. I accidentally double-clicked the JS file. It was immediately parsed by WSH and ran. Well, duh. Have you discussed this vector before? Why on earth is this a built-in feature of Windows? I understand the need and value of scripting, but damn, allowing invocation of a downloaded JavaScript file with no warning? Wow.
So this is something we've never talked about. We talk about JavaScript running in browsers, but it turns out that somewhere along the way, Microsoft decided that they would allow JavaScript to be interpreted natively. On Microsoft's page discussing this, they say the Windows scripting host, which is WSH, supports scripts written in Microsoft Visual Basic Scripting Edition or JavaScript. When you start a script, the scripting host reads and passes the specified script file contents to the registered script engine. The scripting engine uses file extensions .vbs for VBScript, .js for JavaScript to identify the script instead of using the script tag used in HTML. Because of this, the script writer does not have to be familiar with the exact programmatic ID of various script engines, which in Windows jargon you would otherwise need to use in order to invoke the scripting engine. And they conclude saying the script host itself maintains a mapping of script engines to program IDs and uses the Windows association model, that is file extensions, to start the appropriate engine for a given script. So I could empathize because, as a security person, there have been times when I've been messing with live viruses or live malware. In fact, CryptoWall was one of them. And it is just really unnerving. I mean, it's like, we've all seen science fiction movies or various, or maybe even not science fiction, where somebody's dealing, in a level 4 biohazard lab with live virus. And you just really need to be careful. And our instincts about clicking and double clicking, I mean, he clearly meant to select it, click once to drag and drop. Well, and Leo, you're making a face, but believe me, it's so easy.
This is why we say don't open attachments, because there are many, many executable extensions besides exe.
Right.
You can, a .pif file is an executable. Did you know that? I know that because we're old DOS guys. But you can't look at it and say, well, I wonder what happens when I double click it. Don't double. And by the way,
I know. No, and so, but his point was that, he's a Security Denial listener. He knows how to DM me, and he never thought he'd be caught by CryptoWall. But he was deliberately inspecting, because he was curious, a JavaScript
maybe
host,
he thought it would open up in text edit or something.
Well, or he may have intended to right click on it and then select, open with. I mean, it is so. There's a weird thing that happens when you're dealing with something.
Double click it.
Yeah,
but JavaScript by itself wouldn't infect you. You'd also have to have a vulnerable system, wouldn't you?
The Windows scripting host is extremely powerful.
It runs at a high.
You can do stuff in there that you can't get from the command line.
So CryptoWall is not an exe; it's a JavaScript file.
No. But for example, it could have gone out and fetched it. That's
and
the kind of thing. Oh yeah,
without a UAC warning.
The scripting host can do all kinds of things.
This guy turned down the security on his system, or he
might be running as admin.
Yeah. Well, not just running as admin. You would get a UAC warning. I'm sure of it, before it would allow a program to be downloaded and run by JavaScript. Well, maybe not. I don't know.
Remember that you're not in the browser. The browser has a different.
It's WSH.
Yeah.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
But UAC runs system wide. It's not just in the browser. It runs system wide. And
but it also, but UAC is not just a run a program. It's saying something you're doing is needing elevated privileges. And I don't know whether CryptoWalls
maybe not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Guy Smiley in the chat room said, no, you wouldn't get a warning. So it wouldn't have to be an exploitable computer, and you wouldn't see a UAC warning. It would just be running it.
Yeah. And again, this I've really wish I had like an extra year to mess with the PowerShell, because boy, what Microsoft has built into Windows is so amazing. But that's not what I'm doing right now.
WSH is great. PowerShell has kind of superseded that, I think, but WSH is the engine that can run ECMAScript and these other VBScript. Nathan Ray, tweeted at SGGRC. Long tweet. Steve, I have a question. As most crypto is based on large prime numbers, how many primes are there to choose from? I looked it up, and there are about 1 billion. But I don't have... What? But I don't have any idea of how many there could be in a 128-bit binary number. My brain doesn't work with numbers that big. Well, that's a legit question, because there's an infinite number of primes, but in this constrained space, there would be a number.
Well, and isn't your intuition, it turns out this is a place where our intuition is wrong.
Yeah.
Because we know that a prime is a number that is not divisible by any number other than itself and 1.
Right.
Which, of course, everything's divisible by 1.
Right.
But no other numbers in between 1 and it are divide it evenly.
Right.
But and so we start 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, then 11 and 13 and 17 and 19 and so forth. But so sort of intuitively, if you actually write them down, you notice they start getting further and further spaced apart, because there are more opportunities for them to be divisible by one of the things that came before. And so your intuition sort of assumes, well, we're going to kind of run out. Like way out there.
Way.
There's just so many other numbers that have come before. Certainly one of them would be able to divide by that. And so it's a really interesting characteristic of primes that they continue to be richly available forever.
Yeah.
And in fact, the way primes are chosen for crypto, like when we get 2 primes and want to multiply them in order to do a crypto operation, is a pseudo-random number generator, high quality, of course, just makes one up. And then what's called a primality test is done on it to see if it happened to guess one that's prime. And if not, it guesses again. And then and its primality is checked, and so on. So, and it turns out that no matter how far out you go, that there are still primes like all over the place, which to me was a bit of a revelation when I first encountered it. I thought, isn't that interesting? They don't get more rare. They're just scattered, and actually they're prevalent even. So it's not like they're really hard to find, and that the fact that they're hiding because they're hard to find makes them more valuable. In fact, that would make them less valuable, because if they became really rare when they were really big, we need them to be really big for security. If they also became very rare, then it would be much easier to guess what they might be. But the fact that they're all over the place, when they're really big and a high population of them, means that doesn't confer an advantage on somebody who's trying to guess what the primes might be that you chose by random and then worked with. So I love this stuff.
But I guess in 128 bits, there are a limited number of primes. I mean, any subset of the infinite.
Well, and that's where I mentioned he's sort of confusing things, because 128 bits is
just the size
is only relevant to symmetric cryptography, where you choose your key at random. All of the primes are useful for public key crypto, and maybe in an RSA crypto you're dealing with primes like 1024 and 2048 bits. So really, much longer ones. You would not be using primes down at 128 bits because there are not enough of them down there to have security. Right. There, it really does become too small. Nobody uses 128-bit public key crypto. We use 2048 public key crypto.
So I thought I'd try this. I saved a little JavaScript file as a text file to my desktop just to see if I could just double-click it and run it. This is Windows 10. And yes, indeed, the Windows script host ran it without warning. Ooh. And that was it. So I stand corrected, and I apologize to our anonymous tweeter. In fact, if you have a .js file and you double-click it, whether it's an attachment or just on your desktop, it runs.
Yeah, and
no warning.
And clearly he knew that he got bit because he double-clicked out of habit.
Right.
I'm sure he wanted, as you said, Leo, he wanted to inspect the JavaScript just out of curiosity.
Right.
But instead, he launched it, and he was a little bit surprised that Windows runs JavaScript.
So don't. Yes, it does. Don't. It's
Yep.
an executable. Don't run it. It's an executable. I'm kind of impressed that CryptoWall can use a JS file to install itself. That's
It's
pretty
only
impressive.
because that Windows scripting host is unbelievably powerful.
Yeah.
You can edit. You can edit the. Global profiles.
Right.
You
It's
you
great.
can do
Yeah.
group policies.
Yeah.
It's just incredible.
Yeah. Mike in San Francisco brings us the "You're Doing It Wrong" foible of the week. Not fable, foible. So, recently I tried to log into Wells Fargo. My first mistake. The site informed me I must pick a new username and password to meet its new security standards. Oh, that's scary. I looked at what was required and changed my username slightly. Then I tried to enter a new password generated by LastPass. Despite the fact that Wells Fargo's own new password hint suggestions were indicating a password up to 14 characters and all sorts of other rules, it wouldn't take anything longer than 8 characters. This took a while to untangle. It kept rejecting everything I tried, despite telling me the length was right, until it occurred to me to ignore that and backspace 1 character at a time, trying the submission each time. When I finally whittled it down to just 8 characters, my new password was considered valid and accepted. This is pretty bad in this day and age. It's even worse. The password hint text doesn't even match its own validator. What?
Wow. This sounds like a committee that needs to have more meetings, even though committee meetings are notoriously awful.
Yeah.
It's like 3 different groups are all working on their own aspect of this, and they're not talking to each other. Wouldn't you think someone would have tested this? That how did this not get tested on a password longer than 8 characters, when the whole reason Wells Fargo was insisting this happen is their new security standards?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna guess that it's also possible that maybe there was a disallowed character in the other characters that he deleted.
It could be
like
that very
right?
could be. It's like character 9 could have
Yeah.
been a curlicue or something.
Yeah.
And
But boy, if 8 characters is not enough, is it? Even if
No,
it's a
and 8
mixture of upper and
characters-
lower and numbers and
it's
punctuation, it's not great.
even with a big alphabet, that's just you cannot get enough entropy
Yeah.
into 8 characters.
Yeah.
If we assume about a 6-bit entropy per character, which is a good rule of thumb, then we got 6 8s is 48. So that's 48 bits of entropy, assuming, completely random. That's just not, 48 bits is not enough security.
Alan Ambler is our last question from Cincinnati. He brings us the Networks feature tip of the week. What's Networks? I've been using Networks.
Okay, so Networks is what I talked about, that really cool
yeah,
network monitoring app a couple weeks ago.
Right. Now I remember, yeah. He says, I've been using Networks for 2 or 3 years. You're right. It rocks. My fave feature is the ability to set an alarm for streaming below a per-minute threshold, which when automatically doing stream capture recording. In other words, it alarms and notifies me if the connection drops. If a certain level of bytes per minute are not achieved within a 3-minute interval window, I get the annoying 3-tone phone company disconnected alarm. It's great for unattended downloading of huge files, which might not complete.
Well, and so I just wanted to mention it again, NETWORX. I got a lot of positive feedback from my recommendation, and one person mentioned that he uses it not to monitor his own machine's bandwidth, but his entire network's. And it's like, oh, that hadn't occurred to me. Turns out right there on the UI, where you select which network interface of your machine you want it to monitor, if you have more than one, there's a clickable link. Monitor my router instead. And what is so cool is that there's a protocol. I don't think we've ever talked about SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. SNMP is a UDP-based, very simple messaging protocol. you send a UDP packet to port 161, which is the default SNMP listening port, with a query in the form of a long dotted number. It's crazy. It's all standardized. They're called MIBs, MIBSs. And so it'll be like, it's like 20 dotted numbers. It looks like an IP address from like 3 times over. But many routers support SNMP. That is, you can ask them things. And one of the things you can ask them is for the count of bytes in either direction on one of their interfaces. They just total them all the time. And so if you ask every second and you get 2 totals, you subtract the second one from the first, or the first from the second, and that gives you the number of bytes in that interval of time between queries, which converts then to bandwidth. So the point is that just by clicking that little link on networks, first it said it didn't come up with a list of interfaces. And I thought, I'll bet I never turned on LAN side SNMP on my pfSense software on my little router. So I logged into pfSense. Sure enough, that the SNMP was not turned on. I enabled it. It took a second. Then it came up. Then I went back over to networks, said, I want to monitor my whole network. Now it showed me all of the interfaces. I chose the one for the LAN. And ever since, I've been watching the network I've been watching the bandwidth, not only of my own machine, but of everybody, all of the systems and iOS devices and so forth on my network. So again, props to networks. It couldn't be easier to do that. I know I went into a lot of detail and made it sound complicated, but there's no need to look up MIBs and dig around or do anything. It just said, hey, yeah, I want to monitor my whole network. So very cool little piece of freeware. And thanks, Alan, for bringing it back up, and all of our listeners for saying that you know about it or that you were glad for the reference.
Great. I got to try that. Steve, we're done.
Yay.
Got them all in.
It's still the same day, too.
Wow.
It's still Tuesday.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
Yes, very good. Just went out with a bunch of friends to a nice restaurant, relaxed, and had a couple bottles of 05 Jordan Cab. And
nice.
Yep.
Yeah. I know the Jordan family. They do a very nice job.
My favorite cab.
Is it? Oh, that's good to know.
Yep, it is. Yeah. I ran out. I was drinking 03 Silver Oak for a while. I ran out of the 97. The 07.
You love that Napa stuff.
I do. Yeah.
I know the Silver Oak people too. I know all of those people.
Yep.
That's funny. I served on the school board with the Silver Oak family and the Jordan family.
Huh.
Judy Jordan and Tim Duncan of Silver Oak. They're very nice people.
Well, they make very good Cabernet.
I'm not on the board anymore. I would get some for you. We do this show every Wednesday at about 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern Time, 21:30 UTC. If you want to watch live, we'd love it. But if you can, and I understand, you like to listen in the car while you're on the treadmill or whatever, this is always on demand, and that's at grc.com. That's where Steve has his audio versions. He also has great transcriptions from Elaine, as you heard. Some people just read the show.
Or they read along.
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
We also have audio and video at twit.tv/SN. It's on youtube.com/securitynow. It's on every app. We got Twit apps everywhere, including 4 now on the Apple TV. If you want to watch, you could do that. Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, everywhere. Just subscribe. That way you won't miss an episode. And I know there are lots of schools that use this for curriculum. Thank you. This show, it's, all of our shows are growing, but this show's growing faster than any of them. It's probably has something to do with the subject matter, but I think it also has a lot to do with you. Nice job, Steve. Thank you. If you want to get Spin Right, you oughta. That's at grc.com, as well as along with all the free stuff Steve offers all the time, including Shields Up, all that stuff. Thanks, Steve. Have a great week.
Next time we'll do I think a deep dive techno episode. So everybody get ready.
You know what the subject's going to be, or is this?
We'll have some fun. There's 2 topics. There's Australia did a really bad some sort of chip and pin standard that Matthew Green had some fun with that I haven't had a chance to dig into yet, but I'll see about that one. And then there's also a horrible security device, which is like a residential security system that apparently got everything wrong. So it might just be a gourmet episode of boy, are you doing your security wrong?
And I begged Steve, and I know he's tabling or considering it, to do a blockchain episode. We've done Bitcoin, but blockchain in general.
Right.
Because I think I need to understand better how it's used for things beyond currency.
Yes,
by the way, we record this Tuesdays, not Wednesday. The chat room saying, what are you talking about? This is Tuesday. Tuesday, 1:30 p.m.
This feels like Wednesday by the time we're done.
It's my Thursday, but I don't want to confuse people.
That's right.
Thank you, Steve. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, my friend.
Security.